there. Welcome to the Playing in the Sandbox podcast, where we are deeply committed to inspiring action in today's leaders. We need to kick off your shoes and step into the sandbox today. Dig your toes in and get ready for a wonderful conversation with Larry Brey, who is a pastor of an Elevation Church, and we call him LB. That's what he's most commonly known as. And we're talking all about building up others to lead. In fact, how do you build up others to lead? What are the tools and the keys and the steps to doing that in a volunteer capacity as well as in your organizational capacity? So let's get ready for some great conversation and head on over in the meantime to tammyjbond.com/podcast. Click on this episode with LB and get your copy of today's action plan. Well, he's got so many great tools in the episode. We've got a few other little nuggets that we're going to add into that's going to help you learn and equip yourself to build yourself up, right? To lead, right? How to build others up to lead. It's going to be a great conversation for you. So head on over there to tammyjbond.com/podcast. And in the meantime, I want you to get your pen and paper, get ready to take massive action toward those notes that I know you're going to want to listen to this episode multiple times, friend. I promise you. Let's get to it. Okay, we are excited to have you, LB, in the sandbox. Larry Brey without all the ers, right? Like Briars without, I loved when you told me that. Like, I got to make sure I'm saying LB's name right. Welcome to the sandbox today. And I'm thrilled that we get to talk all about developing leaders.
This is going to be fun. I was never probably good playing in the sandbox as a kid. And I was probably the kid that, you know how they always told you they hung out with the wrong crowd?
Were you the wrong crowd?
I was the wrong crowd. I was that kid in the sandbox. But you learn a lot of things by being the wrong crowd.
Yes, you do. Either you learn how to navigate it successfully and get through it, or you stay with it and you learn from those mistakes too.
Well, it's the gift that's being expressed. It's just the direction that's questionable.
Ooh, nice.
It really is. And so for me in the church world, there's so many people who don't feel like they have much to add to the kingdom. I'm just like, that gift that made you successful in the world when it's submitted to Christ can move a lot of people towards the kingdom.
Come on. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it really is. So in the sitting in the church side of it, I see all these gifts in the kingdom that people are like, oh, could you use this? I'm like, what made you really good at throwing parties will make you great at leading a campus.
It's true. It's true.
It
You've
really
got
is.
that gift of hospitality and that gift of bringing people in. You're gonna be able to do it, right? Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. I think I've shared with you before the characters in the sandbox. So we've got Johnny the sand thrower, you've got Nick the castle kicker, you've got Susie the shovel stealer, Harriet the hoarder. All of these personalities come into the workplace or into the leadership place, right? So which one were you in the sandbox?
Which would be the one that would be kind of throwing the sandbox over? Like, which is that one?
Well, that's the new character, and her name is Dora the Destroyer.
Okay.
I'm really excited about our conversation today because we're going to be talking about developing and building up others to lead. Because you've been in the church world with Elevation Church for 17 years. You're one of the original, right? The OGs. I love that you call yourself the old guy, but the original gang. And you've been in it since the beginning. And that means to me, not only have you learned a lot about your leadership, you've figured out how to plug in the right people or course correct in building leaders quickly so that you could expand and grow people to their capacity and the capacity needed. Fair?
Yes. Fair. Very fair. I think every organization has to go through that, kind of the original shareholders into the second generation, but how much of a signal loss do we get and what kind of quality loss do we get? And every generation's, but by the time you get to the third or fourth kind of iteration of it, you've distorted so much of the original DNA that it looks nothing like the beginning. And I think the seat I sit in today with our organization is, how do we take the original DNA, the original structure, and how do we keep imparting that into this new generation of leader that's coming into the organization?
Yeah.
And so that's what keeps me awake at night.
Yeah. it should keep you awake when you're developing and building up others around you to lead, right? And you were talking about how even in the church world, going back, most importantly, to my world, church world,
Yeah.
to the original DNA, why that's important, right? Why is that foundational aspect important for continuing on as you're expanding and building and developing to such a huge capacity?
When I look out at the church planting world today, I see a lot of pastors that are kind of stepping into trying to be the lead, the number one. But what I see is this false humility that doesn't embrace the uniqueness of who they're made to be. And because what makes you unique is what makes you powerful. But what happens when you're not embracing the uniqueness, you defer that unique thing that God has given you, and now you're trying to build what everybody else likes rather than building who you are. I have had about 4 or 5 conversations in the last year with pastors that have grown ministries to above 6,000, 7,000 people, all in the 7 to 9 year range. All of them loved their church. They just didn't like it. And what they had built was something to serve everybody else, but it wasn't uniquely branded and it wasn't uniquely created based upon who they were made to be. And there were such sad conversations because they didn't embrace the original DNA. They let a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's good when we're making a decision, but bad when we're building something.
That's so good. And when you're, because it applies not just in the church world, it applies in the
Yes.
leader world, in business, entrepreneur or corporate environments, it applies.
Yes.
You're trying to build up and lead others. You got to understand to lead yourself well. And if you let go of that original DNA, as you speak to, you let go of that original heart and vision. It's one thing to correct or to expand it or to adjust it as you're growing, but that core of who makes you who you are, when you let go of
Yes.
that and you set that aside, you've now become not you, you're becoming something for somebody else in that leadership space. And then people don't want to follow false leaders. They don't want to follow fake people.
100%. And I think there's, when I look back on those conversations with those pastors and other things I've seen, I think there's a couple big buckets of why that exists. One of them is the senior leader doubts what they have. It's unknown. I have no idea if it will work. So why wouldn't I borrow what worked for somebody else? And you live in a land of cut and paste. I'll just kind of take what they did and paste it into my context. So there's that. And Tammy, do you play music at all? You musical?
I'm a singer. I am not an instrumentalist.
Okay. I'm not either. I'm not a singer or an instrumentalist, but they tell me when somebody starts playing guitar, nobody starts with learning chord charts or notes. You don't start with sheet music. You start with playing a song you heard and you mimic a sound. I think that's what leadership is. You mimic a sound, but eventually you got to start making your own notes. If not, you're a cover band. How many leaders are mimicking somebody else's sound because they don't think theirs is special? And I think they don't. I would rather trust something that I know works for you rather than it's unknown for me. I think that's one big bucket for leaders. I think another big bucket is fear of losing people.
Oh, totally. Especially right now.
It's absolutely. And so I can't lose anybody. So rather than raise them up to a higher standard of vision and values and voice, I'll lower my expectations so that I'm not coaching, I'm not developing, and I'm allowing kind of the degradation of the DNA.
There's so much to unpack with just those couple of sentences right there. And what happens, whether it's in the, I work in the leadership space. It's what I do, whether it's at church, whether it is in corporate or, small companies, right? When we allow that degradation to happen and we don't want to stand up to as leaders to say, no, because that is a complete sentence, to say, no, thank you. We're actually not going to operate that way because here is who we are. Here is what we want
Yes.
to be known, seen, and celebrated for. Here is the why behind that. When leaders can't go there, when they choose not to, and they give up to the fears, right? Whether
Yep.
it's the self-saboteur in my head, the gremlin that sits on
Yep.
my shoulder that says, you're not worthy. You don't know how to
Yep.
lead. Nobody's going to listen to you. Wait, what's the vision that you had in the beginning? And go
Yes.
back to that. That's that purpose statement. Forget vision statement. You
Yep.
had a picture and a vision, but you put a purpose statement behind it of who and why and how. Go back to that, right? Because when you get
Yep.
outside of that and you allow the outside voices of the others to come in to distract you,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you're going to implode. And
Yes.
even at the volunteer, it's so hard for me knowing what I know about leadership on both the volunteer side, right? I'm not a fan of the term voluntold. I don't like that. I think it actually
No.
degrades the person that's in the position to be of service. And
Yes.
so, and if you feel that way, I'm happy to ask you to sit down until we can correct that thinking, because
Yes.
that's going to spread, right? And we
Yes.
don't want that. That's not a part of who we are or who we say that we are, right? But when we can't actually stand up as leaders to say, this is who we are and this is how we're going to operate, and that behavior, those choices aren't matching. So what do we need? What do you need from me to help correct that? Because I'm on
Yep.
your team, right? So hard, especially when I see it in any position, but when I see it at church, that fear that comes in of, oh, we got to hold on to everything so tight. Our volunteers, we can't lose them. Oh, they're
Yes.
limiting the growth. So that's that's
Totally.
my sandbox story for a minute.
That's a good sandbox story because it's a very applicable story. Because when you start out as a leader, what is the vision? Okay. As people come along, you will let them pollute it or you will let them dilute it. And to pollute is to allow contaminants into it that were never meant to be there. It doesn't mean those things are even bad. They're just division. It's different vision. So any leader that's watching this podcast right now, maybe hit pause and write down the word pollute. What have you started to allow to be introduced into the culture that's polluting the vision of what you set out with? And then to dilute, you're withholding things because you don't want to offend people. You're withholding things because you don't want to lose people, and you have diluted down the potency of the purpose in your organization because of a fear of man.
Yeah, so good. That is so good. And when we pollute it in that way and we diminish, right? We take away,
Yes.
we detract from the purpose of what we're here to do and the impact. When we don't have those bold conversations, whether with an employee or with a volunteer, we actually are robbing that individual of the gift of what we were put in their life
Mhm.
to help them do, to help them overcome,
Yes.
to help them navigate. We're robbing them of that. We're robbing ourselves also
Yes.
of being able to step up as leader to lead through that discomfort. So,
Yes. Well,
oh,
and
I
what
could
I
go on.
love about what you do, Tammy, is because I think practically the gap that exists in a lot of senior level leaders is the space to get in the sandbox. It's where can I take a dry run and a dress rehearsal on an awkward conversation so that you can coach me in real time? Because I think where you add so much value, Tammy, isn't in here's the 5 tips and the tricks. They can get that anywhere. What you bring is a space to say, let's sit in the awkward conversation right now and let's you and I practice it. So before you start taking live bullets, you understand what it's like to have that thing shot at you.
So thank you. Yes. And it's fun. I love that. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, look, conflict happens. It's not a matter if, it's when, it's how you navigate it that's important. And I'm not going to be offended by the conversation. I'm going to look at it as a learning opportunity. And I want you to adopt that same thinking. It's not that
Yes.
someone's attacking, it's someone doesn't understand. So seek to understand, ask them, right? Assume nothing and then seek knowledge. That's it. That's ask right there. ASK. Just assume nothing, seek knowledge, right? So
Yeah.
that's the power of that play that you speak to, and it's important. And thank you for realizing. Yeah, and I know that you do that because I hear from others that sit around you that get to feed from what you're teaching, and I've been in the room to feed from, to be able to glean into, and that's so important because you present in such a way. And that's the value of so many great leaders, when they can present in a way that it's digestible and
Yeah.
applicable now for people.
Yes. Well, we wanted to have the conversation on building others to lead. For the person that's watching this podcast right now, that's going like, whoa, this is like really hitting me. Here's how one easy step you could take to building others to lead would be recognize where you're polluting and diluting. I think you'd agree with me. Awareness is such a superpower in a leader. And when I've done this and I've seen other leaders and my pastor do this, to step into the room with your team and say, guys, I want to apologize. I have allowed polluting and diluting of the vision in a way that I'm aware of, that I cannot unsee. And I want to tell you specifically, here's how I've done that. And I want to apologize, but I also want to say my commitment is to never let that exist again. Talk about leading others.
Yep. That just modeled that saying I was wrong, or saying I misstepped, or saying I failed or I screwed up is okay. No matter your position, no matter your title, it's actually embraced and it's okay. And I want that from everyone, to say, ooh, wow, I don't know what got into me. That was wrong. How do we get a
You mean
do-over? Right?
You mean I don't have to have all the answers to be the smartest person in the room?
You know what?
What?
There's your gold star for the day. You don't have to be that. There are no have tos, choose to, get to, want to, right? Yeah, it's true. And what you just modeled there, we talk about building up others, whatever the role, when I'm here to impart parts of what I know into somebody else, I'm building you up to lead yourself well first, hopefully. That's always my goal. So then you can transfer that out, whether that out is to your spouse, whether that out is to your kids, whether that leading out is to your volunteers, or whatever that is. Start with you and then go outward.
Yes.
That's what that does.
Yeah.
And building up others to lead. And I love what the piece about where's my thinking or my self-talk or my talk about others polluting the environment that I'm in. And now what am I going to do about it?
Yes. Your words create someone else's reality. And we need to understand the weight of those words, but it's not just for other people. It's the atmosphere of our heart. It's the condition of our mind. And some of the things that we speak and the way we pollute and dilute what God says about us is offensive to the gospel. And I can't build a healthy team if I'm not a healthy individual. I didn't say perfect. I didn't mean without sin. It means walking in awareness of, God, how do you see me? And how do I see myself in this moment? How do I reconcile those into a space that I can actually move forward in life? That's difficult.
It is, but it's also so powerful when we get to be in that place. And it is a game changer for us. And if you're struggling, for the leader that's out there, if you're struggling with the team around you, if you're struggling with the people of, they're not doing it the way that I, and then finish that sentence. Well, go back to the mirror and look in the mirror and take a reality check on you to see what you might be contributing. And then go back to that original DNA, right? That original purpose, and say, have I stepped outside of that? Right?
Yeah.
That's going to help us get back into that alignment as well.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that superpower of self-awareness in the leader isn't, you have to have somebody coaching you on that, because to look at yourself is such a scary preposition, because I don't want to look in the mirror, Tammy. Like you said, look in the mirror. Like, I think I'm pretty ugly. I think my nose is busted. And so I don't want to look in the mirror, Tammy, because I don't like what I see there. So now what do I do, Tammy?
It's a great question. You got to have a truth teller to the left and to the right that's going to be there to say, hey, here's what I see. Right now, look, I just did that last week. I was just with and I wish I had one at hand, and I don't. They're over there. But I just was with a group of 60 leaders last week. We did a whole bunch of training on leadership development, and for people that have been promoted but not prepared to lead others. And so we're doing a great training with them. And I handed them all out a little handheld mirror. And they all sat there and said, so when you have challenges, here's what I want you to do. Hold the mirror up and look at yourself and get real. I don't like that. I'm like, it's okay. You know, it's all right. Here's the questions. And I gave them a series of questions to ask themselves, just 3 easy little questions to ask themselves to reflect. And then if that's that uncomfortable, go back to like get in with a partner, somebody that you can, a mentor, or maybe just another
Great.
coworker that you trust is going to be a truth teller for you. Insert
Yes.
important word, truth teller,
Yes.
that is going to tell you what they see, and then go back and ask yourself those questions. And there is the eat the meat, spit out the bones. There are the pieces that I'm going to take what I can and leave some of it behind, only for the good of up leveling, so I can be the better leader, because when I'm better, then I get to lead others well, right? So
Yes.
such a powerful tool.
One of the things that I get to do in Elevation is I do the onboarding for all new staff members. And so part of that is that replication of the original DNA. I feel the weight of it, and I want to invest in something I get to do and I love. The first day, what I have them do is I take out their phone and I tell them, what are you going to do on the day where you don't think you have it or you want to quit? You have to store the answer up in advance. Otherwise, you'll generally get it wrong in that moment. The psalmist said, why so downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed within me? And it's demonstrating the self-awareness and spirit awareness of saying, like, I'm jacked up today. What's going on in me? We had, gosh, this would have been year 2 of the church. This had been back in 2008. We had a man come in named Cliff Barrows. Cliff was Billy Graham's right-hand man for 50 plus years, started with him in LA, went to be with the Lord a few years ago. In his last decade, he lived in Charlotte here. And he came in and he co-preached a sermon with Pastor Stephen on a Sunday morning. He could barely walk, he could barely see, but the wisest men I've ever, I think, talked to. And I asked him, I said, what did you do on the days where you didn't think you could do it, or you didn't know if you wanted to do it any longer? He said, oh, Larry, the greatest sermons I've ever preached were the ones I had to preach to myself. And he said, if I didn't know the answer before the question was asked, I'd always get it wrong. So what I have people do in that moment is to store up the answer. The struggle of your past where you wanted to walk away is waiting for you tomorrow. Unless you do something different today, you'll repeat it tomorrow. So here's what I want you to do. Take out your phone, and I make them do this. It's really awkward. They walk around the building, and they got to open up their camera, and they have to record themselves preaching to themselves. LB, stop it. You were praying for this moment, and now you're complaining about it. Quit being a little bleep.
Love it.
It's not made for Instagram, but what I'm teaching them how to do is to know where to go to find the answer on the day they struggle. I have a photo album on my phone called my trophy case. Nobody else sees it. And it's the places where I know that I felt God's pleasure and he called me to do something. It's the moments where I got a glimpse of doing it right and walking in obedience. It's where I store those videos in case of emergency break class. Because I have to know where to go when I get discouraged, when I want to walk away, when I don't think I can do it. I wonder how many leaders watching this podcast are continually being defeated because they don't know where to go to find the answer on those days.
And that is so brilliant, because when our mind starts to wander, when our self-talk is corrupt, right? When we're feeling, as I say, broke, busted, and disgusted, you've got to have that place to go. And you want to have that place to go, because that's the piece that lifts you up to weather that storm, to weather those feelings, to weather those emotions. And I actually also have on my phone, I have a folder of different, things to remember, Tammy, right? Like that's what it's called, like things to remember, Tammy, so that this is who you are. This is what you're called for. Awesome. This is what others have said. When I can't see it for me, I can get into what somebody else has said or how they've acknowledged, okay, I can breathe again, right? And that is so important for what we're working toward. Oh, look at you. I was like, where'd he go? Nice. See?
So this sits by my desk. It is note cards that have come in since 2006. Because I've got, as a leader, I have got to know where to go to encourage myself. Some of us have not matured because we're always looking for affirmation from somebody else. That doesn't go away. There's still a part of me that wants to be affirmed. But am I growing in that? And do I know where to go? So I've got all these note cards from 18 years of ministry. If you send me a note card, I put it in here because some days I got to go look and say, does what I do even matter? Does it even make a difference? So this, yeah, it does.
Yeah. And what I love about that is that somebody sent those to you. And this is the word, leaders, I want you to hear in this moment. Right now in today's world, you're going to maybe Facebook or maybe Instagram or maybe TikTok to get encouragement from others, what they're doing in their life. But that's false because it's not actually connected, related to you, or you're looking at how many likes you get. And oh, I'm okay, I'm accepted, right? Okay, they like me, they really, really like me. No, actually, they really like themselves being out there publicly, which is why they're putting it out there. And that box that you just showed is actually the box where you get to go to that one-on-one. An individual took a pause in their schedule to write a note, put a stamp on it, old school, mail it through the mail, and give it to you, instead of relying on you to go find it somewhere socially, which is actually it's so negatively impacting everybody right now. It just is. And I think the studies on that's a whole nother conversation. But I love that because that's the power in that box, is that you know that these 1,000 people over this number of years, however many cards are in there, took that moment in time to separate it out because they had you on their heart.
Yep.
And that, of course, elevates. Love it.
Oh, so much. And Tammy, the other part I realized is I was up at one of our locations a few weeks ago, and I was walking around in the morning, and I had this woman come up to me and she goes, "Why are you angry at me?" I'd never met the woman. I didn't know her name. And I said, "I am so sorry. Would you let me know why you think I'm mad at you?" She goes, "Well, you hugged everybody else, but you didn't hug me." And what I have to realize as a leader, that my words carry weight, but so does my silence. How do people interpret your silence? It's a really good question for us to consider as leaders, is what do we put in the blank? What do people fill in the blank with? Tammy thinks blank about me. What do I put in the blank? What we often put in the blank is insecurity. We put doubt, we put shame, we put guilt. Building others up to lead maybe would require you to put pen to paper and say, here's actually what I think about you. Here's what I believe about you as a person. And I can separate who you are from a person and your performance, but that's hard when they've always been stuck together. So maybe one of the greatest gifts somebody else could give is to put pen to paper and say, Tammy, here's actually what I believe about you. So the next time you wonder, boy, what does LB think about me? I can actually go back and I can pull up a note card and I can answer that question. But silence is an assassin, and it is picking people off.
Oh gosh, that's good. That actually really needs to be on a t-shirt. Silence is an assassin, and it's picking people off, right? And it's just a picture with, no mouth, right? A human being with no mouth, right? It's just, whew, that's something. But you're right. It's also, attributed to, I do anyways, attributed to the facial expressions, right? We cannot be speaking, but our face is telling the rest of the story. And I'll often tell folks, if you see something and I'm not saying it, I need you to ask me, because what you might be seeing on my face has nothing to do with you, right? And it has nothing to do with the situation I'm standing in. It could be something completely different. I just have a face that tells a story. I just do. And just ask me, right? So, but that's that piece too. You passed somebody, whether, even if she was at the very back of the line, you went by and didn't capture eye contact with her to give a hug, and her interpretation all on self, right? I love her
Yep.
boldness, though, that she actually came up
Me
to
too.
you and asked the question, because I can work with that all day long,
All day long.
all day long.
All day long. But would you agree with this? We all think people see us the way we feel about ourselves.
I do actually agree with that, because we're interpreting, we're constantly filtering it through our brains. So I do believe we're filtering it through our
Yes.
storytelling of our history and our experiences. And when have I seen this before? Our brain is a heat seeking
Yes.
missile. It's going to go to work to go,
Yep.
when have I seen this? When have I experienced this? And what was my reaction to it? Right?
Yes.
Our brain goes
Yes.
there for us automatically. It's an autopilot. We get to be intentional about shifting that.
We do.
Flip the switch
And that
off.
woman, and the woman that said that to me, it's because she didn't feel worthy. But me as a leader, I can sit there all along and say, that's silly. And at one level, yeah, it might be. But the reality is, to whom much is given, much more is required. As a leader, am I unintentionally exposing people's deficits in a way that's detrimental? The unspoken parts of a relationship that I remember when my wife and I, speaking of silence, it was funny. We've been married 23 years now, and we 4 kids. We met in January, engaged in April, and married in October of 2000. And as we are driving from North Carolina up to Richmond, Virginia, I'm going to meet her parents for the very first time. And I've got the engagement ring in the center console, and she doesn't know it. And I'm going to ask her dad, can I marry your daughter? And she doesn't know that. But we're about an hour into the trip, and she looks over at me and she goes, why are you so mad? And I'm like, what are you, in my head, I'm rehearsing the script. Mr. Marsh, I've never met you before, but can I marry your daughter? Like, that's what I'm rehearsing. And she goes, I said, why would you think I'm mad? She goes, well, you've been silent for an hour. Because to her growing up, when dad got silent, it meant he's about to explode. When I'm in bad versions of husband, I can manipulate that for my own gain.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair.
That's the unhealthy version. That's who I don't want to be. But it's not just in my relationship with my wife. It's my relationship with my kids. It's my relationship with the people that report to me. It's my coworkers. It's that awareness of there's a relationship of back and forth that even if I'm withholding it because I'm in my own head or I'm offended at them, it still creates things in their life that God never wants them to walk through.
Well, when you're building others up, part of that whole, or others up to lead, right? You're equipping them with the things that you've learned along the way, positive or negative.
Yes.
Ideally, the more positive than negative, but you're equipping them and giving them those tools to use as well. And so to know that about yourself, and obviously the conversation went well because you've been married for that long. So it worked out. I'm curious though, did you tell her in the car what you were processing and
No,
let the cat out of the bag?
no, I
Good for
didn't.
you.
I didn't at all. I was like, it got in a little bit of like, I can't believe you're like, why would you think I'm mad? That's silly. But then I started to realize as we grew in our relationship, I would then use that as information to help her to say, hey, babe, I'm just kind of be thinking about something here. So I'm going to be quiet for the next hour or so. She's like, I'm good.
Because she just needed that verbal confirmation, that verbal understanding of what she was seeing. Yeah. Because again,
And
we run
I
everything
need
through
that
code.
in relationships.
Yeah.
I need people to do that for me. And I need to do that for other people.
Yep. Yep. You create that environment and that space for people to be able to do that for you, and you do it for them as well, because you know the value of it. And I think often when leaders get, when they get stuck into into some of the most challenging situations, is simply because the lack of self-awareness and the awareness of their own impact. I will tell leaders, I'm notorious for saying I do not believe in an open door policy. And I don't believe in advocating for that. And my reason I don't advocate for an open door is because the minute that your door is closed, because you're in a really important meeting and somebody needs you and you're not accessible to them, but you have an open door, they're going to filter that through their own interpretation of they're not worthy for your time. They're not in the favorite circle. They're not in the friend
Wow.
zone, whatever you want to call it. Everybody has a storytelling a part of it. And then they're offended and they go away. And then that spreads out through Cubicle Nation in your office environment that, well, it's not really an open door policy. So just don't tell them it's an open door. Tell them I'm available, set up a meeting with me, but don't say I have an open door, come by anytime, because I guarantee it'll backfire at some point. And what you just shared,
I like that.
you're welcome. And what you just shared though is akin to that look, I've got an expression on my face because I'm thinking something through and I'm processing it, but I didn't communicate to you that that's my style. So therefore you're interpreting something. So then you tell them, like I said, if I'm not saying it, you're probably seeing it. So please ask me, right?
Yes.
Take responsibility for how you project as a leader and let people know so what you know about yourself in advance, so that when they're coming alongside of you to partner with you or to learn from you, they're not assuming the wrong things.
Yep. I think that's so healthy. And especially with people who have existing relationships, you've got a lot of game film to look back at. I had this conversation with one of our staff the other day who was having some tension with their supervisor. And I said, here's what I need you to do. I need you to actually create a list for the next one-on-one of, here are a bunch of times where I did not know what you wanted from me nor expected of me. And I need you to give a specific example. But I said, I also need you to make a list of, here are times I knew exactly what you wanted and expected of me. And I need you to talk about both lists. If you only walk in saying, hey, I'm not getting what I need, you're not really actually helping that leader lead you at the level they could. They also need to understand where it was successful because they need to repeat certain things, but they might need to start doing things differently. But so much frustration happens with unmet expectations. I didn't know what that face was, and I didn't know what to expect of it. So I just went and suffered in silence. Well, your cat died that morning, and I didn't know that. And it would have changed everything.
Exactly. And it's funny how we can go in, and I see this so often with teams, both, again, volunteer side as well as corporate, business side, both teams, where people come in with their own expectation of what they've just experienced at home. They're going through a challenging relationship issue. Their kid is sick. We have a daughter who has special needs in our house. And there are times where that's heavy on my mind and on my heart. But if I don't communicate with people what I'm experiencing, they don't know how to receive me when I come across a little intentional, or how shall I say, high impact, meaning I can get very directive in my communication when I'm over processing something. And I don't mean to shout people down that way, but I know that about myself. So my responsibility is to communicate that, right? When we can be that aware at self level, when we're in leadership, we build up others to lead like that. We also tell them that it's okay, or what our expectation is. That list, though, can I just go back to that? Great way to show them the two sides of it. Yes, you're frustrated about this, which we can overprocess and talk to ourselves so good on those lists, right? But to bring in the what is working is such a good tool that you gave them, because the next time when they don't need to come and talk to you, they're going to have that in their toolbox now to go, wait, so here's what I'm frustrated about. Here's what's working. Which one outweighs each other right now? And what's most important to take forward?
Wonderful. That's wonderful. And that's relationship management. My wife and I, because it was, which is the one in the sandbox that likes kicking it over? That's destructive destiny, or
Dora the Destroyer.
Dora the Destroyer. For Dora's, we get defensive. If there's a conversation, it generally starts with, oh yeah, what do you want? So that's Dora. Dora's got fists up. We're ready to fight. My wife, whenever she would try to bring something to my attention, oh yeah, we had to work on safe language that says, hey, LB, if I want to bring something to your attention, what's the phrase, what's the question I can ask you that you agreed to that you can't punish me for asking?
So good. So good.
And so then she would be like, hey, you seem a little off today. And we scripted the script together. That is so helpful in a working relationship. Hey, if I'm aware of some tension, how do I bring it to your attention in a way that doesn't feel awkward or make you feel like I'm questioning your authority? Like, to work on safe language in relationship, what a gift that would be to leading others.
It's a gift to do, again, in the environment where, I guess I'm going to say it this way: for leaders that really are here to make a difference, not just in the job, but really in the people. More importantly, in the people. If I'm here to make a difference in the people that I'm around and leading, either as a team member, right? And maybe I'm not leading anybody yet, but I'm a team member, so I'm leading myself well. That's important, as well as in those opportunities where I get to go in and lead people, whether at work or as a volunteer, and I get to impart to people, asking them how they like to be communicated with. That's one of the things I teach all the time is, you're taking on a new team member, sit down and just say, so when conflict happens, how do you like to navigate that? What's some things that are good for you? When we have a challenge and struggle, what are some of the things that you need to feel safe in this place? And we talk all around psychological safety today. Well, part of that is just simply opening up the dialogue for people to tell you what they need. You know what? I'm a processor. I'm not a processor. I'm really much in the moment. But I know that my husband is a processor, and I know that many people I work with are processors. So I will say to them, I just did this with a leader this morning, early in the morning in a call. I know you're a processor. I want you to take today, but here's my request. You're going to be ready to come to me at the end of the day with what you come up with after you process, or do you need until tomorrow? He's like, actually, could I have until tomorrow? I'm like, fantastic. By this time, and I'll always set the by when, but I give their brain the space to process, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because they're not all fast like me.
And sometimes we're so fast we don't see 80% of the stuff we could have seen if we walked a little slow.
We're like this, you and me. We get it.
We get it. But it's such a healthy place. When we hire new staff, week one, they got a 6-week onboarding experience. Week one of the conversations with their supervisors, I put together a list of about 25 different prompts that are, what are you expecting of me, and what should I be expecting of you, and what should I be expecting out of working here? Some of them are very practical, like what should I expect on holidays, or some of them are a little more tactical, like if you text me on a Saturday, are you expecting me to respond? Is there a difference between when you email me and when you text me? Are there different urgency levels? All the way down to, hey, when you give feedback, how generally has it gone poorly and how has it gone well? And so we're just trying to fast forward through the unexpressed expectations. Why should we fumble for 9 months trying to figure it out? Why can't we accelerate through it in 9 days and get to a better baseline?
I wholly agree. I would love to come and sit in on your onboarding just to watch how you masterfully do it. That is amazing, because there are people, I love that we have it figured, you have it dialed in and figured out, because it does have an impact, and it's a bigger impact than what you're just seeing in those staff members in front of you for that number of weeks. It's the 6 weeks. Yeah, it's these people, but it's the ripple effect. And it is no different than when you drop a rock in the pond and the rock is gone. I don't see it, but its impact goes on and on and on and on, but you don't see it anymore. And so what you're doing, though, in those 6 weeks is you're creating those ripple effects that they get to take out to them. So well done. That's amazing.
The number one factor in the longevity of that individual is the relationship with their supervisor. But what I do, week 3, there's 4 relationships that every new employee needs in their life. One of those is given, and the other 3 you've got to find, and you are ridiculously in charge because you are an extreme owner. And so you're given the supervisor. Supervisor's job is to make sure you know how to do your job. It doesn't mean they can get you better at your job. It just means that, do you know what's expected of you? Really clear expectations and job description. The other 3 roles, you need a friend in the organization, somebody who laughs with you and gets you. They get your corniness, but it's shared ignorance. They can't help you get better because I'm struggling. Me too. But now you need a mentor in the organization, someone who helps you specifically get better. And I force them to identify what area of mentorship they need in the next 13 weeks. Is it financial because I haven't built a budget? Is it lifestyle because I don't know how to have a work-life balance? Is it as a spouse because I feel like I'm stinking as a husband? What area? Pick one, and we're going to be intentionally mentoring, developing that. And then the last relationship you need is you need a pastor, somebody who's going to carry the burden of life with you. That's one of the greatest gifts I can give them, but they are ridiculously in charge. And those that have a great working relationship with their supervisor, because we would get people leaving the organization and they didn't feel cared for by their supervisor because the supervisor did not have that skill set or ability. I had to create clarity that says, don't expect that from them. But you got to expect it from somebody, and you got to find it.
Right. It's up to you to find it. Yeah.
Yes.
So good. So good. So listen, I am loving this dialogue and this conversation, and there are so many more things that I want to ask you, but I do have one question based on what I heard you, since you got to teach from the platform on Sunday, and that was so fun to watch and see.
Thank
You
you.
said something that tickled me though, because I'm going to tie it to a question I always love to ask people. And you said, we should ask more of our people as adults, what do you want to be? Right? We've stopped asking that.
Yeah.
We ask the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then when we grow up, it's what do you want to do? Right? And so we went from being to doing, and it's like, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I always ask, what was the dream of your 16-year-old heart? And the reason I ask that is most people at the age of 16 were like unstoppable. And I had these huge dreams and these things that I wanted to do. And maybe I'm not achieving that. Maybe I went a completely different direction. I know I did. Sort of. At 16, I had a dream to go into, ironically, the medical field. I wanted to go into cardiology. And I still work with people's hearts all day long. It's just in a different way. Right. So what was the dream of your 16-year-old heart? Do you remember?
Yeah, it would have been. So let me give you a little context. Life at that point, I was one of 5 kids growing up in a farming town in Minnesota. Lonnie, Luann, Leslie, Larry, and Lance. It was a good Catholic family from Minnesota, but home life was very dysfunctional. The world my dad grew up in, he recreated. So he grew up with a lot of alcoholism and abuse. And so he recreated that for me and my siblings. And it was not a good place to be. And so for me at age 16, the goal was just not to be there. And so the dream of a 16-year-old heart was to get a college scholarship for wrestling so that I could get away from the home because I didn't want to end up being a farmer like my dad. I wanted to go to medical school. I wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon, and that's what I was going to do. And went to college, blew out my elbow, long story. But when I go back to the spirit of that 16-year-old boy, he really wanted to help people. He really did. He was tender for people, and he really felt like I could make a difference in the lives of people. And now,
look at you now.
I'm not in medicine, but what I do matters more, and I get to help people. So I love it.
So you still get, you achieved that, right? It's just that
I did.
That reframing, and I love that. So thank you for sharing. And I don't know if I told you we were in Iowa for a while. We lived in Dyersville, Iowa.
Oh, yes.
And it was very cold there.
All of the Midwest is cold. It's just
loved the Midwest. Just was really cold.
it's a hardy bunch. They know
it's
how to
a hardy
survive.
bunch. Yeah, amazing people. We loved our time there. But so where'd you go to college? I forgot.
Division II school up in Minnesota called Moorhead State University, and then got my master's degree at Kent State University. So prior to the whole church thing, I was a college professor. I taught sports medicine and did that for a number of years.
That's amazing. See, again, your heart for people. Look at that. You've still helped people. You're helping them every day. So, and today you've helped build us up to be better leaders and to lead others from a position of health and strength. And I appreciate your time in the Sandbox today, LB. It's been amazing.
It was a joy. Thank you for letting me jump in the Sandbox. It's been a minute. and I loved it.
Well, thank you for all of the minutes. And I can't wait to see you down here, hopefully in the near future, to into Florida, so we get to hang out in person.
I look forward to that
And
very
I
soon.
promise I won't be offended if you don't hug me and you walk by me. I won't think you're mad at me. I promise you that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, LB.
Bye-bye.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the Sandbox today. My hope is that you're leaving with new tools, tips, and strategies to navigate your personal leadership, your team leadership, and your next bold conversation. And thanks so much to LB for joining me in the Sandbox. I cannot wait until the next time when we get to dive into more leadership conversations. And hey, it would mean so much to me if you took the time to share this episode with a friend or a colleague, or listen to it with your team, that those that you think would really benefit from the dialogue that we've shared here today. And third-party affirmations go a long way in today's world economy. And I would be honored if you shared the value that you gained from spending time in the Sandbox with a friend today. And don't forget to head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast to get your episode of today's action plan. And remember, friend, leadership is not something that you are born with. It's something that you grow into. And thank you for taking the time to grow into your next level of leadership in the Sandbox today. Make it a great day.